Take care.
You said that people of color, well, the Republican Party really don't know how to speak to people of color. I mean, what do you mean by that?
Well, I guess the best analogy is, let's take for instance your normal commercial product. Let's say a Big Mac. Okay, liberty is liberty is liberty, just like a Big Mac is a Big Mac is a Big Mac. But if you look at how McDonald's sells the Big Macs, if you look at their commercials, their television, radio commercials, they have a different look, a different feel, a different pace. The people in the commercials look differently. Well, why is that? Because there's a difference in communication in those communities, a difference in accepting of imaging in those communities. So we as Republicans primarily, what we do is we take the same message, we don't tailor it for the people that we're trying to attract. We simply just say liberty, liberty, liberty as Tea Party folks and expect folks to come running. No. Most folks don't even have a definition of liberty. Most folks don't know what the Constitution says. Most folks don't understand the tenets of conservatism and that they are conservative. Most folks don't, in the communities of color I'm speaking of, have never heard of conservative solutions to their very legitimate problems. You have to wrap those solutions, conservatism, in a language, in messaging, in imaging, in a way that is acceptable, swallowable to them, just like a McDonald's will when it comes to Big Macs. Or Ford trucks. I mean, down in Texas where I'm from, you know, you hear all the time, you know, Ford trucks, Texas built, Texas tough. Well, what are they doing? They understand their demographic. They understand us prideful, arrogant Texans. And what they're doing is marketing to how we are, how we feel, our psychographics. We have to do the very same thing in our messaging when it comes to conservatism, pro-constitutional principles, and the GOP. We have to do the very same thing. And that's been missing. If an attempt is even being made to go and talk to those communities, to get behind the blue force field and offer solutions to their very legitimate problems. That's issue number one. Getting the GOP to understand that you've got to have these voters of color that are picking up power in order to win elections in the future, and you better make an ardent, relentless, aggressive, offensive attempt to go in and talk to them and try to draw them into your ranks. If you don't, you will not win elections in the future. You won't be able to do it here in Maryland. You will not be able to do it anywhere across the country, nationally, or most of the major states. So messaging is very important. Taking our principles, framing them in a way that's attractive to that demographic, to that community that votes monolithically. Find those conservatives, convert them, and get them to vote in their conservative values. That's the challenge.
So do you think that people of color really are probably more conservative, but they just don't really realize it?
No, they don't realize it. Conservatism, its tenets, the ideology has not been explained to them. They may think it is a lifestyle. No, it is a political philosophy. It is an ideology. When you do polling like we have, what you find out is, yes, these folks are very conservative, right down the litany of conservative issues when it comes to dismantling the Internal Revenue Service, when it comes to Second Amendment, border security, education reform, church activism in the political arena. Free enterprise, national defense, foreign policy. What you find is right down the list, these voters of color are very conservative. They simply don't vote that way. The Democratic Party has done a very good job of linking racial identity to the party, so that if someone veers away from the Democratic Party, then they're perceived to be a sellout. They're perceived to be an Uncle Tom, an Oreo, a Sambo, all these other pejoratives. They do not know what conservative tenets are. So when we begin to explain to them how you feel, what you believe is actually conservatism, the light bulb kind of goes off. And it begins to make sense to them why the folks that they vote for, they never agree with what they're saying. The light bulb begins to go off. It becomes an illumination to them that, well, maybe the reason why it's so hard for me to attain the American dream is because I'm voting for people who literally do not share my values. They may have my same skin pigmentation, and they certainly have a D behind their name, and mama voted for D's, and grandmama voted for D's, and my granddaddy voted for D's, so I'm supposed to be voting for D's, but oh my goodness, these D's don't share my values. Maybe that's just why it's so hard for me to make it in life. And maybe I need to reassess who I'm voting for, who I'm aligning myself up with politically. And as Republicans, we have to give them that choice. We have to be aggressive enough to say, you know, the old way of thinking that it's a waste of time, a waste of financial resources, a waste of human resources to go into Prince George's County or to go into Baltimore County or Baltimore City, that way of thinking has got to be considered antiquated and foolish, that we need a new way of thinking. We have to have a spirit of emancipation, that we've got to go into those communities, and we have to attract those conservatives to join our ranks.